issues. I'm Tasha Carlson. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2018 after my very first screening mammogram. I had no symptoms, no reason to suspect there was any sort of a problem whatsoever. I had in total 8 cancer-related surgeries. I'm currently the state leader for the Twin Cities chapter of the Minnesota Young Survival Coalition, and I've been a member of Gilda since 2019. I was invited by Annie several months ago to come up with a survivorship talk, something I'd never before considered. What started out as just an outline on some chicken scratch on some scrap paper ultimately turned into this presentation. So I hope that you find it useful, and I hope that you get something out of it. So this talk touches on some life lessons that I learned from my own cancer experience. It will, I just haven't gotten there yet. Yeah. This talk touches on some life lessons that I learned through my own cancer experience, as well as vicarious lessons that I learned through other people, listening to them and talking with them. Some of the lessons that I've learned along the way are kind of raw and vulnerable and sometimes disheartening, but hang in there. I promise I will try to end this talk on a positive note. So first of all, what is a survivor? Well, there's various definitions of a survivor. There's a medical definition, which is a person is considered to be a cancer survivor from the moment of diagnosis all the way through treatment and to the end of their life. That's according to cancer.gov. This may differ from a personal definition of survivor. Somebody might not consider themselves a survivor until maybe they're done with treatment, or maybe not until X amount of time, 5 years or whatever the magic time frame is, beyond which recurrence is less likely. There's 18 million cancer survivors in the US currently. My favorite definition of survivorship is the period of time after cancer and navigating life experiences and the challenges that come with life after a cancer diagnosis. This presentation focuses on all of the lessons learned from the moment of diagnosis all the way through treatment and into survivorship. So, what lessons have I learned? I wish I'd known that the time between diagnosis and coming up with a treatment plan would be the most terrifying period of my life. It's a time of shock, a time of mixture of very strong emotions. You don't yet have a medical team for you designed to ask questions yet, no developed support system for cancer. No one's prepared for this experience, and it's very common to feel very isolated without a safety net. It's fear of the unknown, right? You're entering into a completely foreign world. You don't yet have those resources to lean on. Your imagination runs wild and you catastrophize. That's the typical experience once being diagnosed. I wish I'd known that Googling is never, ever, ever a good idea when it comes to cancer. But it's common, right? It's a very common response that once somebody is diagnosed with cancer, there's a natural tendency to want to learn more. You have all these questions. And Googling is an easily available resource that most people have access to. So it's a common thing that people do. The problem is there's so much misinformation out there, outdated information, or maybe information that simply is not applicable to you and your situation. Despite this, it is such a hard impulse, such a strong impulse to resist, right? I wish I'd known that I would feel utterly abandoned by my healthcare team once treatment was over. I see some nods in the audience. Everybody agree? This occurs when you are released from such frequent follow-up. So for some people, they're going to the clinic maybe on a weekly basis for labs, for appointments, for imaging tests, for chemo infusions, for many things. And sometimes that's on a weekly basis. And all of a sudden, you're done. Your team tells you, we don't need to see you so frequently anymore. Your next appointment can be in 3 months, in 6 months. And this is very confusing for a lot of people. For me, that's what happened when I had my oncologist, my breast surgeon, my plastic surgeon, my physical therapist. They all told me, you're good, we don't need to see you for several months. For other people, this team might include the nurse navigator, the oncology social worker, the radiation oncologist. The almost universal response to being told this, huh? What? What do you mean I'm done? I can't be done. This was your safety net, your security blanket. And the most common response is, well, what now? What do you mean? What do I do? I was not prepared for this one. I wish I had known you are not done when cancer treatment ends and life does not go back to normal. Cancer survivors describe looking at old photos of themselves and having a completely emotional disconnect. They don't recognize that person in the mirror. That person in the mirror is a total stranger. This is really, really, really difficult for family to comprehend because you're done. The hard part is over. For some people, survivorship is harder than active treatment. The old you is gone, and it's been replaced by someone who's maybe older and wiser and more experienced, but you may not recognize them. It takes time, a ridiculously long, unfair amount of time before cancer is not woven into every single thought you have. I wish I had known that cancer messes with your head. It is an experience that really rocks a person to their core, right? There's this twisting of reality that goes on. There's scanxiety. Anybody heard that term? Yeah. So scanxiety is this unrelenting dread that you have from going to imaging tests and the wait for the results, which can be absolutely gut-wrenching. I'm a relatively logical, rational person. And I had 3 more surgeries so I wouldn't have scans. How illogical is that? But that is what happened. I went to my first screening exam after cancer, and I could not imagine going through that for the rest of my life on, however, Q6 months or whatever it is. That's not something that I was prepared to do. And I tried everything that I could in order to avoid it. It didn't work. I still have to have some scans. So the fact is, scanxiety can be very, very paralyzing. Small triggers or small things can trigger you. Maybe it's a location, right? Going to the clinic gives you this kind of remembrance. You remember your experience there. You remember being diagnosed. You remember going there and the panic that sets in. Maybe it's a smell. Maybe the disinfectant from when they, put the IV in, access the port. Maybe the disinfectant brings you right back to where you were. Maybe it's when they flush the IV and you taste the saline. Maybe that's what brings you back. But the fact is, you're right back at the beginning again, and it's absolutely terrifying. Fear of recurrence is the biggest thing that most cancer survivors deal with. It's the ruminating over every little thing. Any little pain I have clearly means I have metastatic disease, right? This fear of recurrence is intimately intertwined with almost every cancer patient's story. And then the perseverating and the catastrophizing, that I can't stop thinking about it. I keep going back to this over and over and over. And then it's clearly going to be the worst case scenario, right? It's a catastrophe. And getting beyond that part can be very, very difficult. And then there's survivor's guilt. If you are in this long enough, you are in the cancer community long enough, you will meet people who ultimately do not survive their cancer. And this can have an incredible effect on the people who do survive. I wish I'd known that people will say all kinds of ridiculous things and give unsolicited advice. But you don't look sick. At least you're young. At least you've already had a child. I thought cancer patients lose weight, not gain weight, right? Everything happens for a reason. Maybe this will help you evaluate the things you need to change in your life. Oh, my uncle had cancer and he died. My cousin had cancer and she died. My neighbor's hairdresser's librarian had cancer and she died. Thank you. That's helpful right now. And how about toxic positivity? Anybody heard that one? So toxic positivity is the idea that keeping positive and keeping positive only is the right way to live your life, focusing exclusively on the positive and avoiding anything that may trigger negative emotions. It occurs, and this is my favorite definition of this, it occurs when positivity is used to cover up or silence the human experience. You'll beat this, you'll be fine. Look on the bright side. My favorite one, you got a free boob job. I did not get a free boob job. Let's just be clear. I had body parts amputated from me and then reconstructed. That is not a boob job. You beat cancer, you should feel amazing. You should feel this way. Be very, very careful when somebody tells you how you should feel. That negates the entire emotional experience. Is how I'm feeling any less valid because it doesn't align with someone else's version of how I should be reacting? And some more on toxic positivity. Don't think about it. Stay positive. Look for the silver lining. It could be worse. Or when people try to guilt you into feeling bad about how you're actually feeling. Why should you have to apologize for having a completely understandable reaction to stress? This serves to minimize the experience, invalidate the emotional impact, and change and deny how you are feeling. I wish I'd known that the disappearing friend phenomenon is all too common. This is the lesson I don't understand. All of the other lessons, eventually I came to understand them. In retrospect, I understand them. I don't understand this one. This happens when friends or family ghost you after you disclose your diagnosis. This is really counterintuitive. Cancer should be a time when people rally around you and support you after diagnosis and treatment. But 65% of respondents in a recent survey said they had friends and family completely cut off contact after they disclosed their diagnosis. This for me was the most painful part of my cancer experience. I had two friends who just disappeared from my life, one of whom I had been very, very good friends with for 22 years. And gone. They were just gone after I disclosed my diagnosis. I still don't understand why that happened, how that happens, and it was a very painful lesson to learn at a very vulnerable time in my life. And I've come to learn this is super common. I wish I had known that healing, physically and emotionally, is not linear. Healing tends to happen in a way that is so unpredictable that it's just maddening. It happens slowly, very slowly, such that the day-to-day progress is very difficult or even impossible to appreciate, and it makes it extremely challenging to even recognize that healing is taking place. So if you think of healing as a graph for a minute, and we'll be nerdy for a second, if you think of time on the x-axis and healing on the y-axis, this is what people think healing looks like. You're diagnosed, you're at your lowest point, and day by day by day, you get better and better and better, and by the time you're done, you're good. It's all great. Actually, healing looks something like this, right? Up, down, the setbacks, the frustrations, the major and minor things that go wrong, and the huge swings that happen during healing. And apparently you go backwards in time too. Hey, that's a good one. I don't know how that happened. But this is what healing looks like. I wish I'd known the collateral damage of cancer is all too often invisible. So there's financial toxicity. This is basically medical debt, avoiding or delaying necessary medical care, maybe cancer related, maybe not, but avoiding going to necessary care due to the concern about accruing more bills, afraid of incurring more debt. So maybe it's you don't go to the dentist because you've spent so much on cancer, you really need to save somewhere. Maybe it's you don't get your glasses prescription updated or get your eyes checked. Maybe you don't get your hearing aids. Whatever it is, you're avoiding it because you don't want to accrue more bills. And this is one of the effects of the cancer. Maybe it's loss of a job or temporary pause of a job or your liveliness or your career. So it's very common for people to have to take time off during treatment and after, and that has no small effect, right? Maybe it's loss of or difficulty with intimacy with a partner. This is a very underappreciated and under-researched aspect of cancer, and it's something that's often not discussed with you by oncologists. Maybe it's loss of fertility or a future family. For people who were diagnosed with cancer young, the surgeries, the radiation, the chemo, the meds have a real impact on fertility. For the fortunate ones in this situation, this might mean taking on extra expense to try to achieve pregnancy after cancer treatment, such as IVF. This might also include the need to maybe temporarily stop hormone blockers. If you're diagnosed with a hormone-positive cancer, you're probably on hormone blockers, which doesn't go so well if you're trying to have a child and trying to get pregnant. So that means potentially stopping that for a period of time. Most oncologists will let people stop for X number of months. From a safety standpoint, they say, we have decided it's safe for you to stop for this amount of time. And during that time, you have to stop the meds, have a washout period so they get out of your system, try to get pregnant, successfully conceive, have a healthy pregnancy, and deliver in that amount of time. Let's go, come on. So adding a clock to something like this, to the time pressure to get pregnant, only causes more stress, which in and of itself makes achieving pregnancy less likely. You're not achieving pregnancy, so you're stressed, and you're stressed because of the amount of time you have left. And it's just a vicious cycle, right? So this is one of the fairly underappreciated aspects of cancer, the other kind of effects that people don't think about. Sorry. I wish I had known that cancer is clarifying. I love this quote. I can't take credit for it, but I found it to be really profound. This person said it. This is Jamil Rivers, and she is the founder of the Chrysalis Initiative. She She said this at a webinar that I attended, and I stole that quote directly from her because I found it to be really true. She has used her experience with metastatic breast cancer to empower other people. She has used her knowledge base to advocate for basically disadvantaged groups that are not typically included in medical research. She's also used her experience to customize support for those groups and to advance legislative policy. Cancer is clarifying because it gives you perspective that can only happen from the possibility of facing your own mortality, sometimes far sooner than you expected. What is important? What is a priority for your life? What parts of your life are you happy with? What do you regret? What should you change? What do you need to do for yourself or your family now that maybe you put off before? So now what? We've learned all these lessons. What do you do at this point? It is common to desperately want to get back to normal, to move on with your life, to get back to your normal routine. But before that can happen, you must first recognize and acknowledge what you've lost, because you've lost a lot and you have to process that grief. Why is that important? Well, before you can become who you will be, you first must recognize who you were and what happened to them, and honor the experience of that transformation. Grief is not only associated with death and dying. Any loss can be mourned. Grief and sadness is your mind and your body's way of telling you, this mattered, this was important to me, I'm angry that I missed this. All the things you missed during treatment, afterwards, that dance recital, that kid's basketball game, the church play, that sweet 16 birthday party, the family vacation, all of that mattered to you. And that can be mourned as well. So you need to mourn who you were before cancer. And then in order to do that, you have to recognize what happened to move on. This requires a ton of self-reflection and introspection. You can't move on and accept what's happened until you literally can define it. For me, I didn't realize the importance of this step at first. I was so focused on what was next, the next thing I had to do. All right, I was diagnosed, and then I had to have surgery. Okay, and then I had to recover, and then I had physical therapy, and then I went back to work, and then it was more physical therapy, and then I had another surgery, and then it was more recovery, and then PT, and then. I was not able to do this step and make space for it because I was so focused on the next step until this was the next step. There was nothing more for me to do but this. Cancer is a thief. It steals from you. It steals a lot from you. It steals health, physical appearance, emotional well-being, emotional security, time, energy, relationships, jobs, and most importantly, it steals your control. So people can have all kinds of effects on their health from cancer, obviously. There's side effects from surgery, radiation, and chemo. There's pain, scars, neuropathy, chemo brain, cognitive issues, fatigue. Neuropathy can make fine motor tasks difficult, which can impact day-to-day life and livelihood, depending on what it is you do. Lymphedema can cause pain and swelling in the affected extremity and limited function. The fatigue from chemo or from the cumulative physical and emotional impact of trauma, because let's face it, cancer is trauma. And this is the part that many times people don't understand. Friends and family don't understand why you're not back to your old self yet. You're done with treatment. You're done. Chemo's done. Think of treatment effects as cancer's version of long COVID. I think in today's society, most people are familiar with the term long COVID. Maybe they know somebody who has it, or they're at least familiar with what it means, and they understand that this means that it is effects from the infection well after the infection is gone. The same thing applies to cancer and cancer treatment. So this may help, that analogy may help friends and family understand where you're coming from. Mourning who you used to be. So your physical appearance may be drastically altered. Surgeries, scarring, radiation burns, weight loss, weight gain, hair loss, skin changes. People may be relieved when treatment is over, but still look away when they pass a mirror because they don't recognize themselves. I have 43 inches of scars on my body that were not there before cancer. And it took a long time before I didn't feel mutilated. For some people, it's hair loss that is the most disturbing and impactful from chemo, right? That can be a very traumatic event. But then even after chemo's over, when their hair starts growing back, it may be very different than what they're used to. I think most people are probably familiar with the term chemo curls, right? Mm-hmm. And for some people, maybe that's great. Hey, I had stick straight hair before cancer, and now I have all these ringlets. How cool is that? It's a cool hairstyle I've never had before. But for other people, it's yet another reminder that that isn't them. They don't recognize that person. That's another thing cancer took from them. I know of a survivor who, when her hair grew back, it grew back clear. She had no color to her hair. It was clear. It still is clear. That was permanent for her. Her hairdresser, her colorist has never seen anything like it. And she now takes it all in stride and she just gets her hair colored. But that is another thing that cancer took from her. Cancer takes time and energy, right? All of that time you spent, all of those appointments, all that comes at a cost. You go to appointments, you have surgeries, chemo, lab draws, imaging studies, physical therapy, and recovering takes a ton of time. It's a full-time job to be in cancer treatment. And it takes energy. The fatigue from treatments can be absolutely soul-crushing, and it doesn't always end when treatments are over. Cancer has an impact on relationships. Intimacy can be a real challenge after cancer for many reasons. Again, all the surgeries, hormone blockers, all of that chemo, emotional trauma from cancer, all impact relationships with spouses. For people who maybe weren't partnered during cancer and during cancer treatment, learning to date after cancer is not something they were ever prepared to do. There's no class in school that teaches you how to do this. And other relationships can be impacted too. Relationships with friends or neighbors. Maybe before cancer, you were the person who your neighbor could come by and say, we're having a bake sale. And you went, great. And you went and baked 7 dozen cookies for tomorrow. Because that's what you do. You are the neighborhood baker. Maybe you can't be that person anymore. And that is, again, a loss of identity. How about the impact on your job? There's lost time from work during and after cancer, which also means lost opportunities for job advancement during that time. There's this feeling of needing to get up to speed on things you missed when you were gone, and this feeling of needing to prove yourself when you get back, to prove that you're still a valuable member of the team. And then dealing with questions from your boss, your coworkers, How much do you disclose? I know of a survivor who, prior to cancer, what she did, she was a medical tattoo artist. So for those of you who are not familiar with medical tattooing, it is kind of a specialty of tattooing, of tattoo artistry, where they help all kinds of patients with cosmetic issues. So sometimes it's scar camouflage, right? It's something very specific. They can do scar camouflage with medical tattoos. For those of you who are not familiar with breast cancer, one of the things that happens oftentimes during a mastectomy is you lose your nipples. And after reconstruction, you may be happy, but it might kind of look like a Barbie, right? It's just kind of a blank chest. And you can actually get hyper-realistic 3D looking, or 3D hyper-realistic looking nipple tattoos. That's a common thing in the breast cancer world. Well, this person did that. That's what she did for a living, and she was very good at it. And then she developed breast cancer. And she developed such severe neuropathy from chemo that she could not continue working as a tattoo artist. That is one thing that cancer stole from her. Finally, last but not least, it is absolutely imperative that you mourn the loss of control. The most basic, fundamental medical definition of cancer is literally uncontrolled cell division. There's a lot that cancer takes in terms of control. There's other types of control that is lost. There's fundamental loss of control on a very humanistic level. Life was upended, turned inside out, upside down. Your ability to make commitments, live up to schedules, gone. This can be one of the most difficult disruptions that cancer causes. So now that I've talked about all these lessons thanks to cancer, what have I learned from it? Well, the part about the time between diagnosis and coming up with a treatment plan being the most terrified period of my life, yes, that's true. You don't even know what to ask at that time. This is usually the time between a biopsy and between seeing an oncologist. I promise you will feel better once you have a treatment plan. Once you have something to look at, something to focus your energies on, you will feel better. And then by that time, you will also have somebody that you can ask questions of. Some of your control and your ability to plan will be restored, although it might look a little different than you're used to. What else have I learned? Googling is never, ever, 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 ever the solution, right? It's such a strong urge to Google. I was more ideally positioned than most people to understand what was coming at me. Did I tell you what I do for a living? I'm a physician. I'm not an oncologist, but I do have a medical background, and I still did this. I know better, and I still did this. It's difficult to ascertain what information is true, current, or applicable to your situation. It just contributes to the tendency to catastrophize, and it serves no purpose but to terrify you, which is completely counterproductive. The same thing applies to social media, by the way. You have a medical team designed to give you the information that is tailored for you. Make sure to ask them all of the questions that you need. This is something that a lot of people describe. They have tons and tons and tons of questions, and they go to their appointments. Every question they thought of has just flown out of their head, and they have no idea what to ask. So I highly recommend that you write down your questions before you go so that that doesn't happen. You can record your appointments on the voice memo app on a phone. You can bring somebody with you to be another set of ears. I've even heard, I don't think this is offered locally, but I've heard about some cancer centers around the country where they offer scribe services for the patient. So this is somebody whose job it is to sit with you with your appointments and take notes. And then when you're done, those notes are yours. That can be very, very helpful when you're trying to process all the information that's coming at you. Feeling of abandonment by your healthcare team is normal. It means that they feel you have improved to the point where you don't need to check in as frequently. But after experiencing something as life-altering as cancer, you understandably view your medical team as a safety net, and you depend on them. You depend on the frequency of those appointments. So what do? Build a new team. Before you move on from oncology, be sure that they have documented a survivorship plan for you. Oncology clinics are trying to do this for everybody, but it's slow going, and so sometimes they don't. If they don't, ask them to do it. A survivorship plan basically is a document that has everything that has happened to you in terms of what was your diagnosis, what was your pathology, what treatments did you have and when, what surgeries did you have and when, what chemo regimens did you have and when, what radiation type did you have and what was the dose and when. There are things that cancer survivors are at higher risk for months and years down the line. And in order to know that and keep track of that, your primary care provider needs to know that. And so make sure they have this survivorship plan, which is basically a handoff between the oncologist and your primary provider to say, here's what they had, here's what you need to look for, and here's your ongoing screening schedules, by the way. So your primary care provider will probably be your first point of contact for new or chronic issues, but also highly consider a therapist. They can help you process the trauma of cancer and the cancer community. Support groups in the cancer community, new friendships, they are also all part of your team. You are not done after cancer treatments. The day you finish treatment is often filled with utter elatement, followed by sheer terror. I'm done. I'm done. People don't understand why you're not happy. Why are you not shouting this from the rooftops? You should be jumping for joy. Feeling conflicted is normal. It is okay to feel however you are feeling. In fact, it's imperative that you feel all the feels to process this and move forward. Repressing how you actually feel will only result in problems down the line. It is okay to feel gratitude and fear at the same time. It is okay to be relieved and enraged at the same time. It is okay to feel exhausted and drained and yet hopeful. It is okay to have completely incongruent emotions. It often takes months or years before you feel normal. But I promise there will come a time when you realize you went a whole day and you didn't think about cancer once. Cancer messes with your head. It sure does. Understand that this happens and take time to reflect if what you're feeling is a primal emotional response, aka panic, or if there's some basis in reality. So again, perseverating and catastrophizing only serves to make you anxious and miserable, and it steals the happiness you have right now. So that random pain, does that mean I have metastatic disease? Or does that mean I stubbed my toe yesterday? Yeah. So really think about whether or not are you panicking because of your experience, which would be normal, but again, recognize that that happens. Scanxiety does get better with time. I'm here to tell you that. But scans can be triggers for you, right? So if you find that you are triggered by your scans, if you are freaking out when you go in for your mammogram, because the last time you went in for your mammogram, they told you you had cancer, try visualizing the scenario beginning to end with a completely uneventful resolution. All right, so sit there and picture in your mind, you go to the clinic, you check in at registration, you sit in the waiting room, they call your name, you walk back, you change in the changing room, you walk into the mammography suite, the tech positions you on that squishogram, and you have the mammogram and it's all fine and nothing bad happened. Try doing that if you're having trouble going to scans. Fear of recurrence, huge in cancer survivorship. But again, some control can be regained. Again, people make all kinds of ridiculous comments. Maybe it's well-intentioned, but some people just don't have filters and they just don't think, right? This is the ultimate test of patience and grace. If you find that this is happening frequently, come up with some sort of scripted general response that is polite but makes it clear to them you're not looking for their opinion and you're really not interested in further discussion right now. When somebody tells you that their neighbor died, I find it more useful to focus on my situation and what I need rather than stories about what happened to somebody else. Or when somebody says, oh, don't listen to your clinic, you clearly need to try XYZ alternative treatments. I appreciate your concern, but after discussing all of my options with my medical team, I've decided that I'll choose the course of treatment that's best for me and my specific situation. What about toxic positivity? So if you have friends or family who are inadvertently completely invalidating how you're feeling, and it's not meant to be, they're trying to help, right? They're trying to be supportive. They're just doing it the wrong way. Pause the conversation and pivot to a more useful construct. If you are telling them how scared you are and they're saying, oh, don't look at it like that. Look at the silver lining. It'll all be fine. Tell them, I need to be able to think through all the scenarios right now. Can you help me with that? I understand if it's uncomfortable for you to talk to me about how I'm feeling about this. It would actually really be helpful if you could do XYZ for me. So they're not great to talk to, but maybe they're a good distraction. Maybe you can take me somewhere. Let's go to an event. Let's do something. Let's do an activity. In this way, they are not invalidating how you're feeling, and they feel good about helping you by distracting you for a little while. Or share your wishes with them. I don't need your advice. I just need to vent. I'm pissed right now, and I just need to talk. Can you let me do that? It would really help me if I could talk for a minute about how I'm truly feeling. I'm lost and I'm scared, and I just need somebody to listen. I feel like the animations are getting slower and slower the further we get into this. The disappearing friend phenomenon. Cancer will inevitably reveal who your true friends are, and sometimes those discoveries are surprising. Some people just can't handle this news for various reasons. That's what I choose to believe about my friend. I have no idea what the actual reason is that they cut off all contact, but I choose to believe that they were just in a mindset or an emotional state in their own lives at that moment that meant that they felt they couldn't take on my crap too. So that's what I choose to believe. I like to believe that because the alternative means they're a terrible person. So I choose to believe the first part. Some people will appear in your life at your lowest point, and they may be the last person you expected. Accept help when offered and ask for what you need. So if you're going through treatment and you can barely get by day to day, much less take care of your house or your family, ask for help. I need help vacuuming the living room today. I need help changing the bed sheets. Can you pick up my kid from school or daycare? Can you walk the dog? Maybe you can shovel the driveway or mow the lawn, because I definitely can't. Maybe you just need somebody to bring you a list from Target. I need a Target run. I did that recently for a friend who spent all of her chemotherapy kind of shut away in her house alone, trying to avoid COVID, and I brought her multiple Target runs. Maybe it's just a ride to an appointment, or maybe it's having somebody sit with you and have a cup of coffee on the porch, talking about anything but cancer. Healing is not linear. There will be good days and there will be bad days in no particular order. Give yourself grace to feel all of the feels, to have those bad days. It's how we process and grow. And then deliberately focus on good things, no matter how small, to remind yourself that there is good in the world. Intentionally seek out little moments that you can enjoy every day. I'm going to steal this story from a friend that I met during cancer and during treatment. Carissa Bates is another Young Survival Coalition member, and she decided to choose joy. So she was diagnosed with breast cancer in her early 30s. She has 3 young children at home. And during treatment, there were days when she was too sick and too weak to do anything but lay in bed. And it frustrated her to no end that she could not play with her children. She could not put them to bed. And it just made her angry. And eventually she got to a point where she realized, well, I can't do it, but I don't like feeling the way I'm feeling physically or emotionally. So look at it a different way. And she chose to look at that time when her kids went to bed, when her husband put her kids to bed, and she laid in her own bed and she listened to what happened. She listened to him putting her kids to bed, reading them a story, tucking them in, kissing them goodnight. And she took great joy in that. You can do the same thing with small moments, no matter where you're at in treatment. Maybe it's watching the sunrise, see the beautiful colors in the sky. Maybe it's listening to the birds. Whatever it is, put on a favorite song or have a cup of tea, whatever it is, something small that you enjoy. The collateral damage of cancer is all too often invisible. It is impossible to know just by looking what someone's experience is like now after cancer, and how totally new challenges may have replaced the traditional difficulties associated with cancer treatment. So most people are familiar with the fact that certain chemos cause hair loss. And you could look at somebody and say, she's bald, she's going through cancer treatment. But you don't know that she might be experiencing the effects of cancer years later, even though that experience might be still very raw and very painful. You're done with surgery, done with chemo and radiation, but you're still struggling to recognize yourself and to move on to life as it was BC, before cancer. Never assume you know how a cancer survivor feels. Ask them how they're feeling and how you can help. And think about situations and be sensitive to the fact that participating in everyday activities may be very painful, even though these activities might be very normal. So a cancer survivor who is supporting her best friend as she has a baby shower. What a joyous occasion, except that cancer survivor can't have a baby anymore. And so maybe that's a very painful experience for her. That's not something you're going to recognize just by looking. You're going to have to know a little bit about the backstory or you're going to have to ask. Cancer is clarifying what is important to me and what isn't anymore. Choose to be intentional about how you spend your time and your energy. None of us have unlimited time and energy, but especially as you're going through treatment or recovering from it, figure out what you care about. Figure out what you don't care about anymore. Let go of things that aren't important or only serve to cause aggravation or frustration. Don't sweat the small stuff. Reevaluate toxic relationships. Anybody have those? Friends, family? If that doesn't work, if the relationship continues to be toxic despite all of your efforts, invest in healthy ones. Let them go and invest in healthy ones. Invest in yourself. What do you need to grow from this experience? Reassess your priorities with yourself, with your family, with your job. So recognize and reframe negative or self-deprecating thoughts. My family would be so much better off without a sick mom or a sick wife. I'm just holding them back. Change that to, because of this cancer experience, my family and I have learned to appreciate the good days and the opportunity to make memories because we recognize tomorrow is not a guarantee. Don't give cancer any more of your time and worry than it deserves. It has already taken too much from you. This is much easier said than done, but it is well worth the effort. None of us knows what the future will bring, but there are steps that can be taken for certain events or to try to mitigate risk. You will be living with uncertainty. However, there are some things you can do to regain control. It may not seem like you have any control at times, but there's a lot that we actually can control. You just need to be able to recognize it and do something about it. Regaining control is empowering, right? Because cancer took all of that from us. Now it's time for you to take something back. We can never control everything, so focus on what you can control. So you have probably, so there's a lot you can do in terms of physical well-being to regain control. To a degree, we certainly don't have complete control over physical well-being, but there is some that we do have control over. Pay attention to your body. And if something feels off, get checked out. Keep up on your regular cancer screenings. For all cancer survivors, you all should have skin checks, colonoscopies, prostate exams, mammograms, pap smears, lung cancer screenings for current or former smokers. You have probably blown well past your deductibles, right? So now is the time to get some of these screening tests. Movement. Maybe you weren't a gym rat before cancer and you don't have the interest in becoming one now or ability to do so. That's okay, but figure out what you can do and do it consistently. If you can exercise, if you can go to the gym every day, fantastic. If you can't, maybe it's something like yoga or Pilates or Tai Chi. Maybe it's walking, hiking, swimming. Find something that you like. Oh, by the way, with regard to cancer screenings as well, if you had a genetically based cancer, if you have a genetic mutation, there may be additional cancer screenings that are recommended for you, like ovarian cancer or pancreatic cancer. So ask your oncologist. Nutrition. So definitely this is where a healthy lifestyle comes in. Healthy eating, not a diet. Diets are temporary and self-limited and generally not long-lasting, but it's a lifestyle that you can work on. Limit or eliminate tobacco or alcohol. Sunscreen, that's something simple we can all do. Something that is oftentimes missed by a lot of people, not just cancer survivors, radon tests for the home. Radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer and the #1 cause of lung cancer in non-smokers. Radon is a colorless, odorless gas that is naturally occurring in the earth that is in most of our homes to some degree. There are tests that you can purchase that can give you a radon, basically the number of particles per million. And there's a reference range above which this is a dangerous level. And there's things that you can do to mitigate some of that. Emotional well-being. Be aware of your mood. How are you feeling today? Maybe you wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe you're just having a bad day. You're having an off day. Maybe you know why. Maybe you don't. Doesn't really matter. But you're just in a bad mood. Be aware of that and intentionally choose to do certain activities or avoid certain activities. Maybe tonight's not the good night to help your kid with the math homework. Maybe you need to avoid spending a ton of time with your spouse figuring out current problems right now in your household. You just need to avoid it because it's just going to end up in an argument tonight. We'll deal with that tomorrow. I'm just in a bad mood. Maybe you need to just take 15 minutes for yourself. Sit in a room, shut the door, unplug, and just breathe. Maybe you just need some quiet time. This is also where support groups come in. Many people find meditation, mindfulness, spiritual practices also very, very helpful. So stress relief, self-care, that's a buzzword in the past several years. Self-care, what does that mean? Well, it means prioritizing your mental health and wellness. And that can look different for different people. Maybe it means regular check-ins with your friends. Maybe it means coffee dates. I always feel better when I have a coffee date with my best friend every weekend. Maybe you need to do that. Maybe it's getting a massage. I always feel better physically and emotionally after I get a massage. Maybe it's manicures, spa days, pamper days, whatever it is, whatever works for you. Music, the power of music. I love music. And I have found inevitably that when I'm having a bad day and I can't snap myself out of it, this is one way to do it. I turn on my music and I belt it out to absolutely nobody. I am quite a diva when I'm singing to an empty house. But I always feel better when I'm done, always. Humor. There's a reason that laughter is the best medicine. Maybe you need to go to a comedy show. Maybe you just need to laugh. That releases those feel-good endorphins, right? Find your non-negotiables. Maybe you find that if you get less than 7 hours of sleep a night, the next day is just a disaster, inevitably. You're crabby, you can't concentrate, you don't feel good, everything goes wrong. But if you get more than 7 hours, generally it's okay. So make that a non-negotiable. Make sure your family knows, I am in bed by this time every night, and that's just the way it is. Maybe it's quiet time, a bubble bath. How about a do nothing day? So many of us get so busy and our calendars are so full that we don't get time for ourselves. Maybe you literally need to schedule a do nothing day. Block it out on your calendar so that you can focus on yourself and do nothing. But be aware that self-care is not all about bubble baths, foo-foo coffee drinks, manicures, and glasses of wine. That's probably part of it. But self-care can also mean doing the hard work of unpacking what happened to you and how you can grow from this. And sometimes you need professional help to do that. What else have I learned? Make changes in your life that support who you are now after cancer. Set boundaries. It's important to recognize and address unhealthy, inconsistent, or non-existent boundaries. It's natural to want to overcommit to make up for lost time, but don't overcommit. It's okay to say no. I'm a classic overcommitter. I had way too much on my calendar. And it was only through cancer that I learned to focus on only what was most important to me. Give yourself 48 hours before committing to something to reflect, do I actually have the time to do this? Can I do it justice? It's better for you and for the person asking that you figure out upfront if you're able to devote the time that is necessary to this project, rather than telling them 2 days before it's due, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. That causes unnecessary stress for you and for everybody. Cut out the things that are not fulfilling. Is it time to reevaluate something with your job or work? Is it time to make a change? Do you need more flexibility? Partially or completely remote or work from home? Is it time to change jobs or careers completely? Is it time to seize the day and go for whatever you've always dreamed about? Maybe you want to become part of the cancer advocacy community. I know of a survivor who was a lawyer pre-cancer, and she was a lawyer in private practice. And once she completed treatment, she went back into the public sector to work in cancer advocacy and disability rights and discrimination. And she loves it. That tattoo artist that I mentioned earlier, who can't be a tattoo artist anymore, she found a lot of opportunity for professional growth for her as she joined the cancer advocacy community. She's the facilitator of several support groups, and she actually facilitates a nightly chat on a support app, which is worldwide. She serves on multiple foundations and advisory boards for cancer advocacy organizations and has guest edited several magazines that are for cancer support. So now it's time to talk about the elephant in the room, the thing nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to think about, the end of one's life. But no discussion about taking back control can be complete without talking about the fact that we do actually have a large amount of control at the end of our lives. So this is where we're talking about planning for the future and legacy work. This is particularly important to patients living with metastatic cancer, but it can and does apply to everybody. So here we're talking about wills, trusts, estate planning, power of attorney, healthcare directive. It's very important to have these things in place. Having a healthcare power of attorney and a healthcare directive is a way to make sure that your wishes are followed. It allows time for you to now think about the various scenarios and figure out what you would want in those scenarios. And it's important that once you do a healthcare power of attorney and you sign it and you file it with your healthcare team, also make sure you have a paper copy and that someone in your family knows where it is. It doesn't do any good if it's buried in some file that nobody knows. It needs to be easily available in the event of a crisis so that your wishes are followed. By the way, if you don't have this yet, one thing to look at might be your employer or your spouse's employer to find out if legal insurance is something that is an option for you. I didn't know that this existed until a couple of years ago when my employer started offering this. Legal insurance is an optional benefit that can be offered to, thank you for coming. Sorry. That's okay, no problem. Legal insurance is an optional benefit that can be opted into through your HR department. It's really quite reasonable. I think it's maybe $6 or $8 a month. It's really quite reasonable. And it covers specific legal services And one of the legal services it covers is wills and estate work. My husband and I finally did this year after many, many, many years of procrastination. I'm really good at procrastinating things I don't want to do. But it hooked us up with an attorney who specializes in estate law, and we now have all of these documents. She told us that if we had not gone through the legal plan, it would have been $3,800. Instead, it was a $50 court filing fee. So definitely worthwhile to look into this to see if maybe during your next open enrollment, this might be an option for you. If it's not an option for you, you can also look at things like Cancer Legal Care, which is an organization for the state of Minnesota that helps cancer patients with some of these issues. And finally, there are also some simple templates online for some simple wills. So the next part is, what can you do after you die? What do you want your life to be remembered as? I know of a woman who, after she was diagnosed with metastatic cancer, she went through all of the typical phases that you would expect after somebody's diagnosed with metastatic cancer. And she ultimately decided to take back control and to do exactly what we're talking about today. And one of the things that she did is she planned her own celebration of life. She figured out exactly what she wanted her funeral, her remembrance to look like. She figured out where she wanted it. She figured out who she wanted to invite and how to contact them, because her husband might not necessarily know all of these people's phone numbers. So she has a list, and she made a list, and she wrote down names and phone numbers for him. She figured out what she wanted her day to look like. She planned the music, the photos that she wanted displayed, the floral arrangements, what poems or book selections she wanted read, who had what role. She planned it all. She even prepaid for it. Now, on one hand, this may seem pretty morbid. On another hand, you can look at this as what a beautiful gift to give her family. That during a time of extreme stress, all of these plans are laid out. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to wonder what would she have wanted, because she told them what she wanted. So that's one thing you can do to take back control. Legacy work. What is legacy work? Do not think about legacy work as all about death and dying. Think about it as making connections and sharing precious moments with the special people in your life. It provides you an opportunity to reflect on your life and process the people and events that made you who you are. It's a very powerful coping tool. It gives loved ones something tangible to hold on to, something to provide comfort and healing. And the beautiful thing about legacy work is there's no rules or restrictions. It can be whatever you want it to be. It's a way to turn thoughts into action. I stole this word for word from the MD Anderson cancer site. It was a very good description. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So what is legacy work? What are some examples? There's so many examples. So maybe it means you want to deliberately take time now to make memories with your family. Maybe you're a parent with young children. Maybe you're a grandparent with young grandchildren. Think about taking a trip or a vacation. There's all kinds of organizations out there that actually do this for people. They provide trips, experiences for people with cancer and their families. And you do not necessarily have to have metastatic cancer to qualify. Maybe it's a letter. I know of a cancer survivor who after her diagnosis of metastatic cancer, she decided to write letters to her loved ones. And she wanted these letters to be given at specific milestone days during their lives. So she wrote a letter for birthdays, for prom, graduation, first jobs, wedding, babies. In that way, she could be there for those events. Maybe you want to make a casting or a molding of handprints in plaster or of the hands clasped together. I will show you what that looks like if you're not familiar. Maybe you're crafty. Maybe you can make a project. Maybe you can make a quilt. Maybe you have a favorite piece of clothing, a t-shirt or a sweatshirt or an apron or a dress, something that your family associates with you. Maybe take that fabric and use it to make a quilt, because that piece of fabric is associated with you by your family. Every time they see it, oh yeah, that's mom's dress. She loves that dress. That can be very powerful if you incorporate that in a quilt. Maybe you wear the same perfume or fragrance all the time and your family associates that with you. Try spraying that fragrance on the quilt. Smell is a very, very powerful sense that can evoke memory. If you do this, consider leaving a bottle of that fragrance to your loved ones so they can refresh the scent when it fades. Maybe you make a scrapbook or a journal. Maybe you are the family cook or baker and you want to pass along family recipes. Maybe they're secret family recipes, but you want to pass that along to the next generation. Maybe you pre-record some videos or have a video montage. Maybe you write a song or a poem. There's any number of things you can do. I know of someone who prepaid for her daughter to receive flowers every birthday. So every birthday, her daughter received a gift from her. Here is a picture of that. I was talking about the clasped hands. There's all kinds of kits out there, and you can do something like this. It's a very tangible thing that you can give to your loved ones. But again, it can be anything. I have a close friend who has metastatic colon cancer, and she wanted to be sure that her daughter had some sort of tangible, personal memory that she could remember her by. So after talking to her about it, she came up with a handwritten inscription and a design. And when her daughter turned 18, she took her to a tattoo parlor and she got a tattoo of this in Alicia's own handwriting with the colors of the colon cancer ribbon. That is something that she will have for the rest of her life. And every time she looks at that, she will remember Alicia. What a special memento to give to the next generation or to your loved ones so that she can be close to her mother, who is still very much with us, by the way. The importance of connecting with the cancer community. This is a circle of people who've been through this before you and those who will come after you. It provides ongoing support, lifelong friendships, and a real clear sense of purpose, which can be incredibly powerful and motivating as well as rewarding. You can support others, attend fundraisers, events, raise awareness. There's just a ton you can do. Finally, what can you do to regain control? Share your story. There are so many ways you can do this. You can write. Maybe you are a writer. You want to journal. You want to write a book. Maybe you have a blog. When I was diagnosed with cancer, it took me a while to find cancer support. And for a long time, I didn't have support groups to go to. It was through blogs that's what kept me going. I found people, survivors who were like me, similar age, similar diagnosis, similar struggles. I saw them survive and thrive. And it was a huge source of comfort and solace for me, especially since it was a time before I had found the cancer community. Use your voice, give interviews, do podcasts, facilitate a support group. Maybe you want to get into policy and you want to do some legislative action. There are so many things you can do. Remember, you may not realize who you are impacting during a time when they feel completely isolated and lost. You have the power to make a huge difference for somebody just starting their journey. You've gained hard-earned wisdom. Use that to help others. This is Nightbird. She was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, and last year she competed on America's Got Talent. She told her story and she sang her song. She was a musical performer, and she got the golden buzzer. So that meant that she got to skip a bunch of qualifying rounds and go directly to the quarterfinals. She had to withdraw because her health would not allow her to continue to compete. And she ultimately died earlier this year. But she had all kinds of quotes about life in general. And this is one of my favorites by far. Thank you.